Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bison Video Blog, semi-final edition. We're down to the final 4 teams left in the 2015 FCS playoffs, and North Dakota State is still alive with a shot to go back to Frisco for a 5th straight year. Along with Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo, as the Bison will play the mighty Richmond Spiders out of the Colonial Athletic Association for a trip to Frisco, Texas, and the FCS National Championship game. For the first time in this postseason, fresh meat for us to talk about. A new team, no longer the revenge tour for Chris Kleiman and this Bison bunch.
New team to look at, new guys to research, new people to talk to, and you know, I talked to the Richmond quarterback this morning. He was available to the media. Imagine that, a player available to the media. But he's a cool, calm cat, I think. He's a redshirt sophomore, but this kid's pretty mature. I mean, he was talking about how he started this Pay It Forward program with equipment, where he took equipment from his buddies, and he did this in high school.
Wow.
And give it to kids who needed it in inner city Philadelphia. So you're talking a kid who's pretty savvy, I think, and so, you know, but he comes to the Fargo Dome now, and it's going to be a different deal for Richmond.
You know this program pretty well, as do many of our viewers that watch us. Richmond is a storied FCS program. They won the national championship in 2008, Jeff. They were the last team to win a road game and go on and win the national championship. In fact, they stopped App State's run of 3 straight titles. They wanted App State in that quest for a four-peat for the Mountaineers, and that was a magical run, because then they went to Northern Iowa, won there, and then routed Montana in the national championship game. Mike London ended up getting the Virginia job out of that by winning the national title. So this is a team that gets athletes, obviously a great recruiting area, and they got some players on this team.
Right. If you don't know the University of Richmond, then you probably don't know your FCS football very well. Out of the CAA, which of course is one of the big leagues in the FCS, I like the way their receivers go and get the ball. And we'll see this in a little bit here, but their receivers are real good. The quarterback puts the ball where he needs to, and they have a slippery running back too.
Jacoby Green is the guy. Ryan, go ahead and you can play the highlights of who we're going to see on Friday night at the Dome. This is their main weapon and wide receiver that Jeff's talking about. Brian Brown, 71 catches, 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns. Kyle Laletta is the quarterback, 18 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions. I'll keep that in mind. Jacoby Green is the guy that Jeff's referring to. This is him right here, and this is what he does best.
And he breaks tackles, too. He shows some speed here, but you saw it in the Illinois State game on Friday night that this guy, you better wrap up very well on first contact, because he'll slip by you. And, you know, those guys can really make a difference.
1,563 rushing yards, Jeff. 21 touchdowns. The Bison, as a team, have 28 rushing touchdowns. Green has 21 on his own.
You're going to see a couple offenses here that are pretty similar. In fact, they're statistically almost exact as far as scoring. Richmond at 35 points a game, NDSU at 34.9. And here again, as we look at the Richmond offense, that's a great timing all right there. And again, their receivers are good.
Defensively wise, here's a stat that stands out to me. 21 picks by the Richmond secondary linebacking core, and that's obviously, they're going to try and pick on redshirt freshman Easton Stick as much as possible come Friday night.
Yep, and they have a cornerback named David Jones who's picked off 9 passes by himself.
Impressive.
And that's impressive. We thought DeAndre Hall was pretty good last week at Northern Iowa. David, I mean, just having 9 picks. This isn't the Big Sky, really, where they're throwing it all over the place either.
Now, as many know, the CAA, long before the Valley established itself maybe as the SEC of the FCS, it was the CAA. They had a run 4 straight times. They had a team in the championship. They won the championship in back-to-back years, where Richmond won it in 2008, then Villanova came back and won it in 2009. Delaware played for the title in 2010. A couple years ago, they had New Hampshire, remember, in the semifinals, who came here, and then NDSU beat Towson in the championship. Routinely, there are teams that bubble up and are really good, and it's Richmond's turn apparently here in 2015.
Well, it's been their turn this year. They started a little slow, but they had a new offensive coordinator, a new system to get used to. In fact, the 31-28 win over Hampton, you think, okay, Hampton, you had to rally to beat Hampton. Well, that was the second game of the year, and obviously they've grown up significantly since then. Interesting part of their schedule, William and Mary on back-to-back games because
that was the finale
of
in the playoffs. So they've been through the revenge tour as well for the Spiders so far this year. Last week I had plenty of comments that we built up Northern Iowa. So let's talk a little bit about North Dakota State and what the Bison have done through the first couple weeks. I think it's still be out on a limb if Carson Wentz plays on Friday night. You agree with that?
I don't think he plays.
Yeah.
I just don't get that feeling that he was at, practice today and number one guy. I think for him to play on Friday night, first of all, it's Friday, not Saturday.
Correct.
And two, I think you just got to go through a couple hard weeks of practice to make sure. I just don't see it happening.
If they win, what about then?
Then I think he'll be your starting quarterback in Frisco.
I really do.
If he's healthy enough to go through 3 weeks of practice, and it'll take a good 3 weeks, I think, to get him back into the fold of things, then he will be your starting quarterback in Frisco if they get through Friday.
Let's talk about the Bison defensive line. We've hammered that throughout this season, but man, Nate Tangway and Brian Schatz are playing at another level that I don't think they've reached at before. They've been tremendous this entire postseason.
And they've been tremendous in both parts of run defense and pass defense, because you had Montana 2 weeks ago with a high-flying offense coming in, throwing it all over the place, and that line held up and put pressure on the Montana quarterback. And then last week you had Northern Iowa coming in with 200-yard rushers,
rushing stats,
just all over the place. And again, that line just bottled things up and made it tough. And Aaron Bailey, who was running over everybody, had just over 30 yards rushing for the game. They had 9 yards in the second half?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Outside of that drive that they got a field goal out of, I want to talk though about maybe NDSU. The one thing they haven't done tremendously in the postseason is maybe stretching the field. That Easton Stick has not gone downfield. Is that something that you think they have to do or need to do on Friday night to be successful?
Well, we thought that's what they needed to do against Northern Iowa, because we thought Northern Iowa would stack it up, but I think the run game got enough creases there, and King Frazier broke that long one that acted just the same way as throwing it downfield. I don't know, did Brock Jensen throw it downfield much? I mean, did he extend the defenses all that much?
I guess I got spoiled seeing Wentz throw it all over the place.
I think you did, because I thought Stick's performance, 13 of 17.
You can't complain about that. No way.
Was very Jensen-like in that he had no interceptions. He was efficient, made some big plays on third down, and that's what we saw in number 16 a couple years ago.
How about special teams here? That's been so huge with what Ben LeCompte has done, and then Bruce Anderson has just become that weapon that Marcus Williams was, that teams would not kick to number one, and they're not going to kick to Bruce Anderson. Richmond would be silly to do that Friday night.
Well, how do you do? Do you pooch kick it, or unless you have a guy?
Right, and then you're going to give the Bison great field position.
He's a guy that just came on, too. I mean, and again,
you saw it happen. You saw it coming, though, in the last few weeks of the season, that something was going to bubble up.
And we asked him after the game. I go, what's the difference now? And he said, I'm just a little more confident, and that I'm able to hit it a little harder. And I guess what he means is by the hole.
This is a bonus home game, Jeff, because I think everybody and their brother thought, and Chris Kleiman alluded to that today at the press conference, that he and Matt Larson were already talking about moving finals up if NDSU was lucky enough to get here, because they figured they'd be traveling to Illinois State. So to get another home game here, this is a massive bonus for the Bison.
Huge bonus.
A huge break, really.
And really, when you're playing on Friday, even though Richmond played last Friday, they didn't
still got to travel.
You still have to travel, and they didn't get the chance to prepare, whether it's NDSU or Northern Iowa.
Correct.
They didn't know until Saturday. So they still have a little shorter preparation time than most teams, just like NDSU.
And you and I have talked about this how many times over. First time for them to come to the Dome, and no matter what kind of crowd noise you play, there's going to be an adjustment for them once the actual game starts Friday night.
One of the interesting things, too, from this morning is that because finals are in Richmond this week, too, they're not able to pump music over their loudspeaker system. They don't want to wake anybody up and disturb the studying. So they're going to do their sound stuff in their basketball arena.
Interesting. What do you make of that?
Well, wherever you can do it, does it make a difference? You still have to work on your silent count somewhere.
Also, news out of the Valley this morning. Bob Nielsen, the head coach at Western Illinois, will take the head coaching job at the University of South Dakota. He replaces Joe Glenn. So after 3 years in Macomb, getting the Leathernecks progressively better. We saw that in 2014 when they nearly knocked off the Bison. Of course, they made the playoffs this year. Your thoughts on him taking the job in Vermilion?
All my thoughts are that he's going to have to step up his quote game taking over for Joe Glenn, because Joe Glenn was the best sound and he was the best from a media standpoint. So, and Bob tends to be a little more on the drier side. So Bob,
pretty straight-laced.
Time to bump it up a little bit.
He's the best dressed coach in the Missouri Valley without question. He still wears coat and tie on the sideline.
He's still got that Bear Bryant presence, doesn't he?
How about that, though? Why leave Macomb for Vermilion? What in your mind stands out to say this is a good move?
The only thing I can think of is that it's a state school, and maybe there's a little more resources there. They're going to do cost of attendance, apparently, and Western probably will not. So you have that as a factor. I don't know if it's money. I think it's about the same, I would imagine, money-wise.
You have to imagine, and recruiting-wise, I mean, I know how difficult it is to recruit to Macomb. It has to be the same in Vermilion, knowing
I think
facility-wise is not, it's kind of a push there.
It's probably the same. That's probably a wash in that area, I would imagine.
So
but even Macomb, though, you have Chicago's right down the street.
Right.
Peoria, there's some pretty good population centers. Vermilion, I guess you got the Omaha. Probably got to expand a little more.
We should know who Southern Illinois hires later this week, and now obviously Western is open, so still 2 coaching jobs open in the Missouri Valley. But big week of football coverage coming up, leading up to pregame show will be at 4 o'clock Friday, leading up to the game, 7 o'clock kickoff between North Dakota State and Richmond, a chance to go to the championship game for the winner. For Jeff Kolpack, I'm Izzo. That's the latest edition of the Bison Video Blog.